In a world where data science holds the key to addressing humanity's most challenging issues, the Data Science Without Borders DSWB initiative has emerged as a bridge across Africa and beyond, linking countries to opportunities that would help governments harness the power of data for positive change.
Data Science Without Borders, starting from its name, is a very interesting project. I'm the lead with a couple of colleagues from very many partnering institutions. It's a dream that we wanted to see data science spread across Africa. We always know that Africa has been known to lag behind the Industrial Revolution, but with the advent of AI and data science, we wanted a project that will bring partners in the African continent. We'll look at institutions coming together to start to harness the power of this new technology, to leverage their data sets, and to build capacity in data science and AI to help Africa realize its dreams through data.
Launched in February 2024, DSWB continues to empower African scientists to champion data-driven solutions. By breaking barriers and strengthening systems, DSWB is driving innovation and creating lasting impact across Africa.
Many times it's been said Africa needs to leapfrog. Yes, we need to leapfrog. We need to catch up with AI. We shouldn't be left behind, but we need to fix the processes that will get us there. Look for the data. Where is it? Is it in good quality? Do we have the people who are going to mine this data, analyze the data? Do they have the skill sets? Do we have the infrastructure to actually do the analysis and punch all these analyses out there? And of course, the governance. You know that Africa has a lot of data governance diversity. How do we get to that point? How do we learn from the different countries? And once we fix these important pillars, even as we leapfrog, it will be the successful effective use of data science and AI in Africa.
With passion, commitment, and collaboration, we can continue building a future where borders do not limit progress and where data science empowers us all.
In application of data science, statistics, and data governance methods and principles, in strengthening evidence-informed decision-making in Africa. His interests also intersect with a range of technical expertise in impact evaluation and data systems. At APHRC, he leads the efforts on data governance through the Data Science Program and Data Synergy and Evaluations Unit. Daniel, welcome to the call.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning.
Thank you so much
for joining us.
Can you hear me well? Yes, we can hear you very well. Thank you. So for this session, we are going to just look at a couple of things about data protection. So to start us off, and I don't know how the level or the range of people on the call, whether they do know a lot about data protection or are beginners or are looking to understand how they can protect their data. Do you think you can just take us through what data protection is and how it looks like in an African research institution, for example, the one that you're working at right now?
All right. Thank you so much, Ondari, for having me and the organizers for the this webinar. So, data protection is just in simple terms, it's the practice of ensuring that the rights of the data subjects, and I'll define what that is, are safeguarded from a breach or things that can affect or can cause harm to the person. And the data subject here is a natural person. I'm sure the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner for Kenya, represented by Oscar, is here, and they can give more detailed definitions for that. But for researchers and people who handle data or deal with data, our responsibility is really to make sure that in whatever way, in whatever capacities, in whatever way we are handling the data subjects are, their rights to privacy are safeguarded. That means because when some information regarding the natural person is accessed by some authorized people or authorized systems, unauthorized systems, they may cause harm if that information is used to cause any form of harm. It can be emotional, physical. The examples that I like using, when somebody gets access to some information about a rich person living somewhere, that person can actually be subjected to some physical assault in the form of robbery just because of access to data, about that person. Yeah, so that is really what I can say about this. Yeah.
Data protection. And you have said that this is just data protection is about ensuring that there's no breach to the rights of data subjects. But what we have seen from our internal survey that we did is that there are different challenges that people are facing in protecting their data, and particularly in the African context, access, privacy, infrastructure vary. So for institutions that are beginning, or rather for individuals who want to start on this journey of data protection, what are some of the design protections that the people should be realistically thinking about, and how can they currently manage this access and privacy issue?
Right. Thanks for the question. I'll speak more from research point of view, because I work in research, and a lot of experience that I've had, especially with data protection, data governance, is from a research perspective. And of course, research institutions are at different levels, as you rightly put, different levels of infrastructure, capacities, and all that. But the bottom line for any data protection process is the safeguarding, which I talked about in the first point I put, safeguarding of the rights of the data subjects. So when you're in an institution, for example, at APHRC, the framework within which we operate is that there are three key things, or I would say, I don't want to call it principles, but there are three key parts of a data protection process. The first one is the people. And the people here I'm talking about, the researchers, the people who are employed in that organization, or people who are handling the data at different levels in that organization. The second is the processes. And this could cover issues around the culture, the traditions of the organization. And all these, they are very, very broad. If we start unpacking them, it can be a very long discussion. Another part of it, which is very, very key also, is the technology that makes all that possible. Now, when you talk about the people here could cover issues around, of course, you need to have a people to be able to manage the data, who are with expertise in different things, legal practitioners, data people, statisticians, data scientists, researchers, social scientists. All those groups of people, they are all people doing something on the data, and each of them has a role to play. Now, something has happened on my screen.
Don't worry, I just spotlighted you.
Okay. So that is about the people. Now, about the processes. Now, you may go to an organization and then you hear something like, this is just how we handle things here, There's just a culture of how they handle things. So even in data management, there's also the culture of data management in that organization. And so, the technology, I think, is almost self-explanatory. Now, when you talk about the processes and the culture, shifting or changing the culture of how the organization handles the data is really important. This is mostly made possible through putting in place policies and guidelines. This is made through putting in place structures such as approval systems in place for data access, who handles data, who handles what, how does data move from one place to another. All those guidelines, they are there to promote what I call the process. Now, for data protection, an institution has to be intentional, has to be deliberate. The way we used to handle data 20 years ago, you cannot handle it the same way today. Things have changed. And therefore, and especially with the new trends of AI and all this, we have to adapt and we have to change. We have to respond to these dynamics. The obligations we have to the data subjects, and the obligations, also legal obligations we have to the regulatory frameworks guided by the data protection offices, or commissions across the continent. We have those obligations, and therefore we have to adapt our systems. We have to adapt our processes. We have to, now going back to the people, we have to ensure that the people have the capacity to be able to do what they need to do. So for example, one of the very important principles in data protection is data anonymization or data de-identification. Of course, they are different. They have different meanings, closely related but different. Now, data anonymization is a very important technique. Now, does everybody have capacity to do it? When the legal document, such as the Data Protection Act, says you have to anonymize the data, it's a statement. It's a statement. And when you put up a policy like a data protection policy within the organization, it's a document. That document can be put on the shelf. Now, what is written in that document has to be done physically, and it cannot be done by somebody in a vacuum. It has to be done by a person. Now, that person has to have the capacity to do it. Now, do the people have the capacity? Then it means if that capacity is not there, the institution has to build that capacity by either training them or exposing them to, to workshops that they can be able, the data staff or the people handling the data can be capacitated. All those things are really important. Another thing that I can mention is continuously, because it's an adaptive process, it has to be continuous. What was, with the AI right now, today can be very different from yesterday, and tomorrow will be very different. So we have to adapt continuously as we go. But the bottom line is really to ensure that we are kept abreast, or we are updated with the emerging trends and all that. Now, when you talk about the technology, it is ensuring that you have the right software, you have the right ICT infrastructure that is responding to these needs. You have, and the software, of course, the people also have the capacity to be able to use that software. Privacy enhancing techniques is not only about putting in place the policies, but it's also about the software to be able to do what that should. For example, the anonymization, you have to have the software to be able to do that anonymization. Yeah, I think I've used a lot of words, but I guess you get the gist of it.
Yes, I do get the gist of it. Thank you. In case anyone in the audience also has questions, please look at line 120 of the Framer pad, and you can put in your questions there. But back to you, Daniel, you have said to ensure data protection in institutions and organizations, they have to invest in people, processes, and technology. Right now, we are also seeing there's this trend of open science within institutions. We're being encouraged to, to open up our data, of course, to some extent. But what are some of the minimum standards and structures that institutions should prioritize to protect data responsibly in this wave of open science and open research, while still enabling a good research environment that still protects people's data and the institution's data as well?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yes, I agree with you. And I think your question really is closely related to the first one. And so the responses may be very closely related as well. But what I can mention here is, open science is about making data more openly available. This can be done through open repositories and either through their metadata or actually making the data sets themselves available, or and also the process that generated those data sets openly available so that they can be reproducible, within the framework of reproducible research. Now, when data is openly available, it means that it can be accessed by anybody. When it's accessed by anybody, you need to make sure that the people, the data subjects from where those data sets were generated are protected. Now, there are many things involved. One is the institutional processes, but also the legal obligations or frameworks within the country. We operate in multiple countries. And so, and data, different countries have their own jurisdictions of law. I've come to learn, I'm not a legal person, I'm a data person, but I've come to learn that the law is territorial. And so the law governing data in Kenya, of course, the bottom line is the protection of personal data. In all data protection laws, the bottom line is the protection of the personal data. And therefore, before data goes public in any open repository to enhance open science, then those data sets have to be anonymized. Because once data sets are anonymized, they are no longer subject to the data protection, the personal data protection law. Then it will now be subject to institutional policies about data ownership and data sharing agreements. So for organizations, and of course, we really very much advocate for open science. It's about the processes that happens just before the data sets are made public. And those processes are those data documentation to data anonymization. Very, very key. Data documentation involves making sure that somebody accessing the data in Ghana, and if the data were generated in Kenya, that person can understand the data without having to ask any question. So that means documenting the data very well, metadata, and all the processes that generated the data. If it is published reports, the analytical processes that happened, including sharing the code where possible, so that people can be able to reproduce the findings. And then number 3, any data sets that are made publicly available or shared outside the territorial jurisdiction of the law, for example, outside Kenya, if data were from Kenya, then those data sets have to be anonymized to the extent that you are not able to link the information in those data sets to any natural person from where this data were generated. I hope I answered your question on Dari.
Yes, you did answer. And I think the points shared on metadata and anonymization are really important to safeguard personal data as well as institutional data. There's so many questions that have come in. However, we only have 2 minutes left to this particular session, so I'll just pick one from the chat. Precious asks, we can implement procedures, processes, and technologies for data protection, but if we don't have the support or commitment of top management, is it really feasible?
Yeah, a very important question, and actually it's a point in itself. Thanks, Precious, for that addition. At APHRC, maybe I can use that opportunity to mention what we are doing at APHRC. We have a data governance group, that really lead the day-to-day work around data governance. The team is embedded in data science program, data synergy, and we have colleagues from across different units as data governance champions. And then we have come up with a framework, and this framework is we have called it a data governance framework at the institutional level. But we will be sharing some of the updates with the team, later on once the framework is fully approved. But the framework has to be approved by the senior management team. Now, operationalization of that framework includes putting in place structures that the framework is proposing, including committees, and having people responsible for different aspects of data governance overall. So the leadership has to play a key role, because everything we do, and I think it operates like that in almost every organization, including government. The cabinet secretary in a government institution, as a government, okay, let me use this example. A CEO in a parastatal, a government parastatal, has a delegated authority from the government to implement what that parastatal is supposed to do. And so that means that any operations within the organization, any sharing of data, it is a delegated authority, and the person delegating that authority is the senior management team in that organization. So that is how I approach it, ideally. So the first thing is to make sure that the senior management team within the organization supports and actually guides the process. It makes even adoption of the frameworks and the guidelines more feasible. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. There are a couple of questions on the Framapad that we would really appreciate if you answer for our participants so that they're able to get answers to that. Thank you so much for a wonderful panel session. If you do have more questions, please be sure to put them on the Framapad. Daniel will be looking through them and answering them. Yes. Thank you, Daniel. And if you put your questions in the chat, don't worry, they'll be transferred to the Framapad, and you can look through to see the answers that are provided by other participants, the panelists as well. Yes, thank you.
So, Ondari, maybe if I can add something before I go through the questions.
Yes.
So there's a point I said, I may have said it in passing, but I'd like to emphasize that point, that data protection, and okay, let me say overall data governance, which encompasses data protection, data management, and all that. Data governance is a role played by everybody. It's coordinated by specific people, but everybody has a role to play. And so even people in this webinar, I think you should always ask yourself, what role do you play or do you have within the organization or within the project you're working with respect to data governance and data protection? For example, I'll use just two examples. When the legal team come up with the law and interpret the law, help us interpret the law regarding data protection. I mean, as I said, this is, of course, they are all legal documents, including the process of the consenting, all legal documents, and guidelines on what should happen, including data anonymization, how data should move from one country to another, cross-border data sharing. But the actual implementation and putting it into practice is a role played by data people or anybody who is managing the data, who you have the data on your screen. When you are looking at that data, before that data moving your desk, it means you are implementing something that the law has said. And therefore, that means that everybody, we have to see a way of how ensuring that we are working together, that we are communicating in terms of, or there's some form of linkage of the different people handling different things within the data lifecycle, from when the data is generated to when the data is being shared, to when it's being archived, to when it's being reused as secondary data. Different people are playing different things, So I just wanted to emphasize that point.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Daniel. It's important to keep that in mind, that we all have a role to play. Once again, thank you for answering our questions. And yes, let us be on the lookout on the Framapad for more answers that Daniel will give. I will now hand over to Michael for the second session of this webinar.
Yes, thanks, Nesita and Daniel. That was really an interactive discussion. Thank you all. So allow me to now introduce the second speaker of the session. That is Oscar Otieno, who is currently the Deputy Data Commissioner responsible for complaints, investigation, and enforcement of the Office of Data Protection Commissioner. He's been an audit with an experience of 17 years working both in private and public sectors. Over to you, Daniel. Maybe you can say hello so you confirm your audio is okay.
Hello. Good
Yes.
morning,
Yeah.
afternoon, wherever you're connecting from. You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Go ahead. Thanks. Maybe you can put the presenter view, and then we're good to go.
All right. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, but the slides are not on
Okay.
presenter view. Yeah.
All right. I get you. I get you.
Yes.
Better now?
Yes, perfect. Go ahead. Thank
Fantastic.
you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much, Nyasita, for having me this afternoon here from Nairobi, Kenya. And thank you also, Daniel, for that icebreaker on data protection. Actually, you've really brought it on an angle, how do I say it, from a practitioner's angle. So maybe for me, I'm just going to highlight the policy, legal, and regulatory framework around data protection. And as it has been introduced, my name is Oscar Otieno. So just straight into it, I must first of all start by saying that this data protection has really become a topical issue, not only in Kenya, not only in East Africa, not only in Africa, but globally. Actually, talking about globally, currently 82% of the countries, last time I checked, have data protection laws. And then within Africa here, we are talking about 78% of countries having data protection laws. So maybe just drilling down into Kenya, data protection is a constitutional right enshrined within the Constitution of Kenya. And I know in many jurisdictions, this is also enshrined within their constitutions or within their various laws that makes it maybe mandatory to protect personal data of their citizens. So here in Kenya, we did have a Data Protection Act that came into place, that was enacted in 2019 November. We are almost 5 years. With this, then now an office was established to implement the law. This is just how maybe many jurisdictions work. You get a law, and then you give the law to either an existing body or you create a new body to implement the law, depending on the mandate of that, of what you want to achieve. So for this, there is here in Kenya, there is an office that looks after that. And with this, to operationalize the act here in Kenya, we do have what we call the regulations. There are 3 sets of regulations, actually 4, but 3 were directly initiated by the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. And this is the general regulations, all of them of 2021. General just talks about the do's and the don'ts. Then we have in Kenya here, it's compulsory that if you are collecting and processing as Kenyan personal data, wherever you are, whether you are in Kenya or outside this jurisdiction, then these laws and regulations applies to you. So then, therefore, we have the registration of data controllers and data processors regulations. And last but not least, if you do not comply with the law, the general regulations, or the registration of data controllers regulations, then you will be handled according to the complaints handling and enforcement procedures regulations. And the office that will maybe handle you here in Kenya is called the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, whose main mandate is to protect the processing of personal data here in Kenya. Then also it's there to protect the privacy of individuals, and Daniel alluded to it. Whenever you are collecting statistical data, how do you protect the privacy of those that you're collecting their data? And should there be anything that does not go within the norms, then the office can investigate any complaint that has been received by any person on infringement of their rights. Then now next, we maybe just quickly, just to bring it up to speed. I know this may be similar in many jurisdictions, but lest we forget, it's good to remind ourselves that, and as Daniel had said, the way we collect data and process it at this day and age is different from the day and times that you'd collect data, put them in a laptop, go with them home, process them the way you want. With these new data protection laws and landscape we are seeing now, it requires that we do process this data in accordance with the principles of data protection, principles that go beyond now protecting the privacy of individuals, but also protect that data. And first and foremost is the lawfulness. Why are you collecting that data? Initially, you'd go initiate a research, collect as much data you want, having no lawful basis, process it without any fairness or transparency. This is now a principle enshrined within various data protection laws. A purpose limitation, but we are going to look at, as I'll be concluding, we'll be talking about some exemptions under this, and I know purpose limitation will be one of them. For what purpose are you using these statistics? Can we find a situation where one individual collects data, then when another institution asks you, do you have data on this? Can you share with me? Do you cross-share? What are the limitations that you have put in place? Then in terms also of data minimization, how much can you collect? How accurately are you processing this data, and can you be accountable for whatever results that come in? Then there is the storage limitation. How long can you store this data? And then last but not least is the integrity and confidentiality that is usually guaranteed by the systems that we put in place. Initially, I know data collection was for statistical purposes was mainly through hard papers, but now we have automated these. In as much as we have automated it, what confidentiality and integrity do we assure of those who give us this data to process? So these are just one of the some of the general principles that surround data protection, and they cut across many jurisdictions, because you find that in many jurisdictions we have modeled our laws around GDPR, especially here in Africa. So they are more or less the same. Some add, some may have a little bit differences, but by far and large, they're the same. Over and above the principles, right now, when you collect people's data, they do have rights. They do have rights under the Data Protection Act that various data protection authorities are implementing. Number one, when you collect someone's data, you just get it and walk away with it. The law now says that at least inform the person whom you are collecting data for what do you want that data for. So they have a right to be informed. Secondly, whether you're doing your stats, your analysis and all that, can somebody come up and access the data that you collected from him? So there is that right to access personal data. And if he or she feels that that data is not correct, does he have the right of correction? Yes, they do under the new laws of data privacy. And if they do not want you to continue processing their data, can they request you to delete their data? Under the new laws, yes, they do have that right. They can request you, now, I don't think I want to continue with this. Please delete my data, continue my data set, continue with the rest. These are rights enshrined within the law, and we have seen complaints arising from these, where people are trying to exercise their rights, but the data controllers and the data processors who have collected this data are denying them their rights under the laws. So there are those who also do not want to be subjected to automated decision making. For example, I know there's a lot of automation that is currently going on, especially with the wake of AI. But in the event that you do not want to engage with a robot, you don't want to, like maybe your data to be analyzed and then a decision being arrived at by an automated process, you can request for a manual process. It is within the right. Not so many people know about that. Well, it improves and simplifies processes, but the law has said that now, if somebody does not wish this to take place, then you can exercise that right. Then you can reject or object to processing either part or full part of your data. And then last but not least, under the rights within the Kenyan law, you have the right of requesting your data to be ported, or even denying your data to be ported from one place to another. So these are rights that we've seen, and maybe in the health industry, we've seen people requesting for their health data being moved from one health facility to another, because maybe you may be subjected to some diagnoses that you've already undertaken. So you can exercise your right of data portability through this. Maybe as we continue as talking about data controllers and data processors, it's just good to know who is a data controller, who is a data processor. By the Kenyan laws, is any entity that is collecting that data and it is determining how it will use that data, that is a data controller. For example, in Kenya here, you could be having a hospital. It will collect your sample, it will process for purposes of diagnosis, and it will know your ailment. That is a data controller. But then we've seen some who just process part of that data on behalf of someone else. Then those now are called data processors. And as an example, if we have seen hospitals who, when you go to a hospital, they tell you go to a facility X for X-ray, or go here for some blood samples, which are maybe taken all over the way across the country for processing, and then the results are brought back. Those who are processing it on behalf of data controllers are now called the data processors. And each and every one of these data controllers and data processors have different obligations within the law. Probably pretty much the same, but now what the law here in Kenya requires the data controllers and data processors to do is, first of all, you need to register with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, just to know who is out there collecting what kind of data and for what purpose is it. Is it for statistical purpose? Is it for research? Is it for historical purposes? Who are these that is collecting data, and what are they using that data for? Then we also have data protection by design or default. We are seeing systems being implemented to protect by default or by design, to protect the data, the personal data that is being collected. So, so much such that maybe in a hospital situation, if you walk into a hospital, should the front office know your ailment? Should somebody at the lab know what you discussed with the doctor? And all that. That is what we call data protection by design or by default. And then we have what we call the data protection impact assessments. As long as if you are collecting data, processing it, and you know that there is a high risk, the chances are high that that data that you are collecting and analyzing, if it goes out, there is a high risk of it having a potential impact on the people that you process their data. Then you need to do a data protection impact assessment, and then now file the risks and the mitigations that you have put in place, so that you can even be advised on the same. Then I talked about institutions sharing data. If you should be sharing data, what are the data sharing agreements that you do have? Why are you sharing? What is the purpose? And what are the safeguards that you may have put safeguards on your end, but on the other end, what safeguards does that person have before you share your data, the primary data that you collected with that other entity? Then we have data processor contracts. We find ourselves maybe getting into contracts. For example, this is the data scientists without borders. You may be contracted to collect data for a particular purpose by an institution X. So between you and that institution X, do you have those data processor contracts? And are they written? Are they cushioning both parties when it will come to data breaches and all that? So, but now when it comes to data breaches, it is within the law that should you be breached, should you have collected these massive data of Kenyans' personal data, and then you're breached, somebody gets an access to them and is maybe selling it outside there, what measures have you put in place? You need to report, first of all. If you are a data controller, you report within 48 hours. And if you are reporting it on behalf of somebody else, then you need to report within, for data controllers, you report within 72 hours to the data commissioner. And if you're a data processor, you report within 48 hours to the data controller that gave you that assignment. This is just basically not for punitive measures, but to protect Kenya's data, to know what happened. If it was maybe APHRC, which other institutions are collecting data for health research purposes? What can we advise them to do
Oscar, I don't know if we
And then,
miss.
yes, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we couldn't hear you for some a bit, so maybe. Yeah, now we
All
can
right,
hear you.
sorry. Oh, sure. Just talked about the data policy that Daniel talked about, whether they're collecting dust or they're alive and what are people doing about them. And then lastly, data retention. As research, you may want to retain these long for various research areas. That one we talked about. You are going to see some of the exemptions right there, but this is what falls under exemptions, the retentions. So maybe real quickly, when you're collecting data and you're processing by personal data, you should really rely on some lawful basis why you're doing that initially. And the most people rely on consent, but consent is really hard to administer because consent is on the side of the data controller to prove that this person gave me consent to collect and process his data. But other than that, the other lawful basis that you can rely on is the performance of a contract. If maybe DSWB was given a contract by APHRC or something of the sort, you can rely on that. A legal obligation, a court tells you to process somebody's data for whatever reason. If it is for the vital interest of a data subject, we saw recently or some time back when there was COVID, if you want to know that you have COVID, we will take your sample and test it. If you don't have machines to test, we will take the samples outside, transfer it, and process it to protect you as a data subject. Then also for public interest, if, for example, if there is an outbreak and the government needs to know how many people are infected in a pandemic, then they can use public interest to process your data. And a public authority, for example, the police wanting to access your data, a legitimate interest, and last but not least, historical and scientific research purposes. You can collect and process data under historical or scientific research purposes. Then again, maybe quickly is on cross-border data transfers. It's good to know because I've seen the presenters here are from different jurisdictions. I know in Kenya, this is what the law says, but currently we are working on an East Africa framework of sharing data within the East African group. But what the law says in Kenya is before you transfer data to other jurisdictions, this is what you should rely on. First is appropriate safeguards. Where are you taking this data? Do they have the proper technical measures to protect this data? Have you looked at the organizational measures that they put in place to make sure that this data is protected? If there is, then you can maybe inform the data commissioner, and then now you can transfer data outside Kenya. If there is any binding corporate rules, I would wish to know more about data scientists without borders. But with this, I presume that you could be having some binding rules that you can transfer data between different jurisdictions that you work in. Then an adequacy decision basically is a legal instrument that satisfies a certain jurisdiction having been competent enough to handle maybe Kenyan's data and transfer as a necessity. I talked about it. If we really have to transfer data for purposes of, for example, a public health, to know that there is this pandemic within this region, and we don't have the facilities to test that kind of for that kind of an outbreak, then we can transfer under necessity. Then last but not least is consent for you to transfer data outside Kenya. But here in Kenya, there is a exemptions under Section 53, which exempts research, history, and statistics purposes. If you are collecting data for statistical purposes, you're collecting it for historical purposes, and you're collecting data for research purposes, then you enjoy exemptions. Exemptions will be under those principles that we looked at. For example, the lawfulness, the transparency. You may do your thing, not really be transparent to the data subject on how you are conducting your research. This is within the law, but if the practitioners within the statistics, research, and historical spheres think that it's really not necessary, then this can be dropped down within, can be dropped out of the Data Protection Act under the exemptions. But these are exemptions that exist there. Other than this, then we have also the journalistic literature and arts. If you're collecting data for journalistic purposes, for literature or for arts, you cannot, then you're doing exemptions. So somebody cannot come up and say that I saw myself in a newspaper at the front page where I was attending a president's public gathering or meeting. There is those exemptions under journalistic. So what is relevant for us here is these three. For example, maybe things to do like retention schedules. You may want to reuse this data for other statistical models. So it's allowed within the Data Protection Act, and I'd encourage maybe most of you to read this. But what the Act really says is that if you want to further process these data, you really need to comply with those provisions that have been put in Section 53 that are under statistical, historical, and research purposes. And also, what you need to look out for is that when you process data under these statistics, historical, and research purposes, it should be in a manner that should not identify the data subject that you collected data from. If maybe, for example, myself and maybe Nyasita or Daniel, or Michael, you know my characteristics and you get a data set that describes me, you should not be able to identify me from that data. So Daniel talked about anonymization and all those kind of techniques. Then last but not least, also the data controllers and data processors should establish those appropriate, especially technical safeguards for the data that they have collected. And these I'm sure most organizations have done, including APHRC. I've not received any complaint from APHRC. I'm hoping to receive one, maybe, I don't know. But I must say that it's because of the good job that you're doing. So currently, we have done guidance notes on research, statistics, and history. We have concluded the stakeholder engagement. We incorporated the views of stakeholders, and I wish this partnership with APHRC had started long ago. We would have included you in the, as an important stakeholder. Not sure because this was done by my sister directorate. So what we're doing right now is to we are just preparing to review those comments and then publicize the guidelines. It will really help you when you'll be looking at that. There was a case study, and I don't think we will be having time to look at the case study because I was given only 30 minutes. I have done this under 20 minutes, and I want to take it back to you, the convener, just in case there is any questions, then we can have time to answer any questions and answers. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Oscar. That is exactly on time, as we had planned to end at minute 56. So we do have actually a couple of questions, and thank you for that lovely presentation on data protection. So there is one about you're able to share your slides so that we can share to everyone who joined the meeting today. So maybe you can respond to that. And then I can maybe read one question and we can do a quick poll and maybe later type in the answers to the question on the Framapad.
Yeah, on the slides, do you want me to send you so that you can share with the rest, or?
Exactly, if that's okay with you, then that would
be,
yes.
Perfect, I will.
Perfect, so the slides would be sent. So maybe you can respond to one question and then I can maybe do a quick poll at the end. So there are, so far I gathered 3 questions from the chat, but just to mention, to just point out one is how are your organizations, for example, the office that you sit, addressing data quality gaps, statistical literacy, and resource constraints in line of Kenya's strategy of development of statistics 2 and the push for evidence-based policy? That was the question. So maybe I can put it on chat.
Maybe it's good to put my video on now so that we can put a face on the presenter, if you don't mind, because
Yes.
that time we the presentation on. Yeah, you're asking about addressing data quality gaps. data quality gaps, yes, statistical literacy and resource constraints in line with Kenya strategy for development of statistics. Yes, we are really not so much into statistics, but when it comes to data quality gaps, what you're doing as an office, I will mainly mention two. We have a training division. We make sure that we train stakeholders who are willing, who have come over and expressed interest. We do work with them. We do a lot of sensitization also on what can improve quality of data in Kenya. And then maybe lastly is through partnerships with organizations such as APHRC. With this, then now we know that data quality is really gets to almost everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar.
Maybe
Perfect. So
I
we,
can-
yes,
sorry,
Daniel, you wanna?
Michael, maybe I can mention about statistical literacy.
Yes,
That,
please.
of course, as Oscar said, of course, organizations such as APHRC and others, and especially through the programs such as DSWB, we do trainings, and workshops that cut across Africa, and webinars such as this on different aspects of data, including statistics. And so, yeah, I think the person asking can be, being on the lookout all the time. But also, I think it's a question that can be general across the continent. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel, for contributing to the question. So we have a minute to roll out a poll, and the poll, will launch the poll. Would like to get your feedback on three questions. So one, was this webinar useful, or the content of the webinar useful for you in your day-to-day practice? And then the next question is, do you think the speakers covered the topic extensively and answered your questions? And the last thing, we'd also like to hear if there is any suggested topics, because we are under OSPO now, and we are planning or organizing this kind of webinars. So we'd like to hear some of the topics that you'd like to for us to plan. So as we get to the top of the hour, so maybe we can leave the poll just running, but just to give thanks to Oscar and Daniel for your time, and sharing your expertise on the data protection, and also thanks to Laura for the discussion session we had in the beginning, and also behind the scene. I'd like to acknowledge Precious, who has been writing down all the notes of the discussion and all the questions that we all get to read once we send in the end. So thank you. I don't know if Precious, do you wanna say something, or Laura, before we end the call?
No, thank you everyone for joining.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Precious.
Thank you
Oh, this
for
is the other
joining.
Precious. Okay, thanks, Precious. All right. All right, so bye-bye everyone, and see you next time.